Scott, welcome to Actadad, the Awesome Dad Show. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to sit here with you today. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Scott, so as I was looking over your resume, as it were, I've been really impressed by the amount of different things that you've been involved with, whether it's family law, being a mayor twice for the city of Coral Springs, which has, 130,000 residents now, approximately. Mm-hmm. You have 5 kids.
Yes.
Right? Ranging right now from age 17 to 35?
Close, 18 to 33.
18 to 33, sure. So 5 kids. Well, I have 2 kids, and that's an accomplishment in and of itself. But one of the questions I want to start with is motivational youth speaking. Mm-hmm. I'd seen that you had started motivational youth speaking a number of years ago,
yes.
And that's interesting to me. How did you get involved in that?
So actually, I was a city commissioner at the time, and this young man named Ian Harris, he was about 11 years old. He wrote to me about some issue of traffic in his community where a car actually went into his house. Make a long story short, as I got to know him, he actually shared, I'm a young person, I'd love to learn about leadership. What can we do as a community? And I decided to ask some volunteers in the community outside of my role as a city commissioner if they would like to join me in a leadership program for middle school and high school students and teach them about leadership, communication, public speaking. And Ian was, one of our first young people that volunteered. I got volunteers, Jeanette Garcia, Cindy Amaya helped me greatly starting the first program. And we started it back in 2003. Since then, we've mentored about 1,400 youth. Wow. In and around the community, teaching them about public speaking, communication, time management, colleges, careers, various topics at different times.
Sure. A lot of things that, at least when I was growing up, weren't really talked about too much in school.
Correct.
And I know it's starting to become more popular to have these conversations, and rightfully so. It's really important, I think, that we give our kids the tools when they get out of school.
Very much so.
And I also sometimes feel like a lot of times parents don't necessarily have the tools because they don't necessarily understand how these things work. So I think it's very commendable.
Thank you.
So another question I have here, again, we talked about all the different hats that you've worn throughout the years. How do you balance it all? How do you handle this? Is one of the most common questions I get from dads. How do you do everything?
So I have a lot of help in a lot of ways. Working here at the city, it's not as difficult as people might think being the mayor. It's not a full-time job. The city manager runs the city day to day. He's doing a great job. We work with great employees. I have a great commission. In my law firm, I have great people that support me and our clients. At the community, I have this amazing helper in the community named Kimberly. My wife is very supportive. My kids are supportive. I love both jobs that I do very much. So if you love what you do and you have great support, and of course I give a lot of gratitude to God as well, it's not that hard to manage your time in a good way to get a lot done and share a lot of smiles.
Sure. So one of the challenges that I have, again, in wearing all these hats, and I've been really enjoying the process of speaking with dads and whatnot, is making sure that I have that quality time with my children, right? That to me is really hard. Are there any tactics or tools that you've put into place so that you can make sure that you're there for their graduation or there for their first dance and whatnot? So
one is just advanced planning. I planned the other day about 4 days in advance to work out with my son on Sunday at 3 o'clock. So on Sunday at 3 o'clock, we worked out. My 20-year-old son. This past year, right before my daughter went to college, we made a lot of plans together that we executed, whether it was a trip, a breakfast, a lunch, hanging out with her and her boyfriend, going to the movies. So planning and honoring those commitments, and a lot of times, putting that first, putting family first, above your job, above maybe exercise. And if you can get them both in, get your exercise in and spend time with family, that's great. So I did that with my daughter too. I've done that with my son, my youngest son, many times. So that's one of my aspects of my strategy. And a lot of times too, whether you're a busy dad as an insurance agent or mayor or whatever professional, it's important to say no. You have to say no to some others' requests on you. And, you say it respectfully, you say it with a smile, but you still have the parameter that, your family's got to come first. So even at my firm, if I have a client with me, if I see my daughter calling, my wife calling, my son calling, chances are I'm going to ask, would you mind if I take this call? So I think if you're very intentional about time, especially quality time with your family, you can make it happen.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And the point you make, Scott, about learning to say no, that can be a really, really challenging thing, right? Especially when you're a mayor and you're an attorney,
Yes.
you're doing all these different things, because you kind of have this innate desire to make people happy, to make everyone happy, but I just don't think you can. How did you learning what to say no to and when to say no is also very challenging.
Sure.
How did you find ways to set your priorities? How did you kind of like put your purpose in place?
So a lot of times before a week begins, most of the time I'll say, okay, this week, let me look at what's already on my calendar and how many more hours might I want to devote to mayor or not? How many more hours to my firm or not? Where does my family need me or not? And if that's a week that, maybe my son's coming home from college, well, I'm going to block out some time, not necessarily with a plan with AJ, but I might make myself available in case he's like, all right, Dad, I'm up for dinner, on a Friday night instead of making a commitment. So if I know, for instance, at the end of this month, we're going up to family weekend at UCF, whatever requests have been made for me that weekend, it's an easy no because I already have a commitment. So a lot of times it's just looking in advance and either making a plan or making a plan to not have a plan and then just being comfortable, saying no. And I might say, well, can you do the ribbon cutting another day? Or is there, can we make a call another day? Or they might want me on a Friday, but Friday's my day for mayor stuff, but it's law firm related. Well, can you call me Thursday night after hours? So I think I have, I would say, generally good relationships with people that I'm serving, whether as the mayor, my home, or through my family law practice. And with those relationships, you can build in some flexibility and understanding.
Sure.
So you can have a call after hours without my wife, being angry about that.
Right, happy wife, happy life.
You bet.
For sure. I definitely see that common theme based on just a couple minutes speaking here. And planning ahead, that's something that I think a lot of people get wrong. They wake up on Saturday morning, they're like, all right, what am I going to do today? And you've already lost the day, right? You're not even actually getting out of the house. I find myself excited and energized when I wake up at 7 a.m. and my daughter's like, zoo? I'm like, yep, I told you last night we're going to the zoo, so today we're going to go to the zoo.
So you just reminded me of an important point that I'd love to share with all the dads. And that is, ask yourself, maybe at the beginning of the day, are you fulfilling your purpose? And in what ways today, tomorrow, this week can I fulfill my purpose or my purposes? So I think my primary role in life is being a dad. So even though my youngest is 18, that's still my primary role. She may have less needs from me, my 33-year-old less needs from me than they did when they were 15 or 12. But when I look at that, it's very easy for me to say yes to my son saying, hey, can I see you this weekend out of the blue, when I might have even had a plan. And I hadn't seen my son for a while, so I might then call my buddy and say, Zen, we had a plan for 4, but I can see my son. Zen, can we make it another time? And Zen knows how important my family is, so he's like, sure, you can see your son, no problem.
Right.
And because that's your purpose. And if you can be very clear with your purpose, then it's very easy not to let your feelings interfere with your commitments. So a lot of times we operate based on how we feel. I'll get up kind of tired, I'll stay in bed. But if you're committed to breakfast with a good friend, or breakfast with your son and a good friend, or whatever, well, you're going to honor that. And a lot of times, too, the way that I'm able to get a little bit more done is I bring people together, people that are important to me. So last night I got to support suicide prevention at the Marlins game with 2 friends, including somebody that's been a president in my leadership program, with my grandson and with my son. And then I got to see the leader of the Florida Initiative for Suicide Prevention. So I got that all within a 3-hour time frame while I'm relaxing and enjoying a Marlins game,
right.
Even though we didn't win.
Right. Well, and that's something that I'm very, very passionate about is finding things that you enjoy or people that you enjoy and bringing them together.
It's great.
Because you only have so much time, right? Time is our
Yes.
biggest, greatest bottleneck, it's our
Right.
greatest resource. So by bringing multiple things together, you can really get a lot done really quickly.
Absolutely.
I love that. And defining your purpose too, really something that I think a lot about. Something I think a lot about. And I think that
awesome.
if you're not thinking about it, you end up, like you said, waking up like, maybe I'll just go back to sleep.
Right.
Knowing your purpose. So I'd like to shift just a little bit here, Scott, to community and community building. What role do you think, and what is your vision as far as what role fathers and families play in building a community?
That's great. What role do fathers and families play in building a community? So I think, first you have to build those relationships at home. And I think one of the opportunities that dads have, especially these days, because so much is different these days than they were when I was a kid and when you were a kid. And one of those differences is the instant gratification that's opportune, that's possible for our children, but also the instant measurement of their self-confidence because of an Instagram post, or because this person has so many likes. So what can we do at home to really be leaders with our families and with our children to help them build their self-esteem and help them learn a lot more than they're necessarily learning because of school subjects? What can we share with them about life? And that takes time. And that takes some dinners, that takes some lunches, maybe some walks, intentional conversation, but it really also takes listening. And I remember doing a leadership program about a year ago, and my daughter Samantha was one of the leaders. We have teens lead the programs, and I had asked the class, so what's one of the biggest issues you guys have as teenagers? And my daughter answered, she said, not so much you, Daddy, but we feel like a lot of you don't listen to us. A lot of the parents don't listen. And my gut is, however much we're listening, we can probably listen more and better and give our kids a little bit more time to really express themselves. I find a lot of young people these days, they are more fearful than ever before of being fully self-expressed, for fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of whatever it may be. And I think as a family, as a dad, we can encourage that not only in our home, but when your son's friends are over, chat with them. So how are you doing? Never met you before. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How many people are doing that and taking that kind of initiative with another young person who's not their son. So I think if we did that, we'll all build that much more community inside our home and outside of our home.
Listening, I think, and that's really profound, I think, Scott. In general, so we live in, like you said, in an instant gratification world where Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all these different platforms are talking to us all the time. And we're being judged constantly, too, by the number of likes and the way that our filter looks on a particular picture and what have you. But a lot of times it feels like we're saying things and nobody's really listening to them. I know that a lot of the fathers I work with and talk to commonly say that nobody's actually listening to me. So do you feel like this is just a human issue where humans need to be listened to? Or do you think that's more so pushed because of the way that social media and instant gratification and digital media is impacting us?
Well, I think there's an even greater need for our children to be heard, because so many times how they're expressing themselves is with a text or with a post, and that's a small aspect of life, right? But it's becoming a much larger aspect of life for themselves. And it's not necessarily all healthy.
No.
So one of the suggestions I have is, hey, let's Sundays, tech-free Sunday, family Sundays. Every Sunday, if all of our city committed, I'm at home with my family, or I'm out to dinner with my family, and maybe join one other family. But you said iPads at home, iPhones at home, Samsungs at home, and you're just being present. our world's going to look a little different, and we're going to build a lot more community. And I think a part of it too is us as parents sharing our vulnerabilities with our children. So a lot of times a 9-year-old can think their dad is perfect. Well, your dad's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. So we can share maybe some of the fears that we've been through, gone through, but still move beyond. If we can share that with our children and their peers, they're going to feel that much more comfortable sharing what their challenges are. And maybe the levels of anxiety will go down. Level of depression will go down. Because a lot of kids these days feel more pressure than I know I ever felt when I was a 15 or 17-year-old. I knew I was going to college. I didn't know where. I didn't know exactly what I was going to study. It was okay. But most kids these days, they don't feel that level of comfortability. And I think that's up to us as dads and parents to help them feel a little bit more comfortable that, the future is bright for them. And there isn't one way to success. And, take care of today.
When you look at the numbers of children that grow up without fathers or not having regular access to their fathers, this is a common thread. It's a common challenge. They don't have that innate confidence. And I mean, I understand why. Everything that you see on the news or on your screen is set to trigger you. It's set to make you scared or angry or upset. And I feel like when that's all you're getting in without a male role model or a father to step in and give perspective, it's kind of a dangerous time, I think, for a lot of children.
Yeah.
So to kind of pivot off that a little bit, one of the things I really like about living in Coral Springs is there's a lot of community events. Like this weekend, I think there's an event, right?
Bites and Sips.
Bites and Sips, yeah. That's right.
Uh-huh.
Bites and Sips, I love that. And the 4th of July was a spectacular performance. It always is. What role do you think, and how important are these events in building that sense of community and building up families?
Very important. And for the city to take a leadership role in doing so for our city is very important. And the fact that, we've been doing it for quite some time is awesome. So before I became mayor, Mayor Campbell was the mayor before, and unfortunately he passed away. We've had events here that really bring the community together and help build community. So this is one event where we have thousands of people, we have entertainment. This Saturday we're going to be raising money for the Bahamas relief efforts, so our community is going to give back to their community. And there's nothing like it, and the role that we play as a city to help build and foster that sense of community, I think is essential. And I think our city as an entity has done a great job, and I think our city residents as a body have done a great job because we have a lot of citizens here that give back. I mean, a lot of volunteers for youth soccer, a lot of volunteers to, help the parks, a lot of volunteers here at the city. My guess is our volunteer ratio is probably one of the highest in the nation. Wow. Something to put forward. Do a little survey on that. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean that's phenomenal. Getting people to be involved in the community can be very, very challenging.
It can be.
It can be. So fostering that sense of community is really important, especially in a world where people might not know who their next door neighbor is.
Right. We had our first meeting just the other day for a middle school leadership program. And at the first meeting, there were 20 people. Usually we have 6 or 8 at a first meeting, but there were 20. Wow. So there are that many people that want to give back, including teenagers in middle school that came to the meeting, not because their mom forced them, but because they want to participate in leadership.
Love that.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
Love it. It's incredible. And I find that when you're teaching and when you're leading, you end up learning more.
All the time.
I mean, that's the best way to learn.
I've learned so much about fatherhood from doing the leadership programs that I've done.
Sure.
Just from interacting with the teenagers, they've helped me be a better dad to my kids.
Did you have any particular mentor that also helped you along the way to say, hey, this is tactic or technique?
Yes and no. Not in terms of tactics or techniques, but the way that they lived and the way that they parented me, my parents. And I remember my mom teaching me this expression at a young age, and it's how I've lived my life. And she said that there's no problem without a solution. And I just recalled the other day how my dad, after 2 big things that could have affected me, in a very negative way, how he responded to that was with such love, enthusiasm, and kindness that even after I swallowed a bottle of poison, a bottle of iodine when I was about 2.5, 3 years old, I remember like maybe a moment or two in the hospital, but what I remember vividly is playing in the playground afterwards, late at night, and it was only me, my mom, and my dad that were playing in the playground. So how he lived was, if there's a problem, okay, we'll handle it, but beyond that, you're going to be doing great. So here I was in the hospital, and shortly after being in the hospital, I'm playing.
Right.
So it's a great way to be, a great way to live. The other end of the problem is something that can give you happiness.
Love that. Love that. You also mentioned just a moment ago team sports. Were you involved in team sports? Is that something you encourage your kids to get into?
I was. I was on my high school bowling team, high school football team.
Yep.
I encourage my kids here to get involved with any sports that they've wanted to. So I've been a coach for my son in soccer. I've been a coach for my sons in basketball. I now coach my grandson in soccer. He's 11 years old. And being involved with sports here is awesome. It's one of the best things that Coral Springs has to offer.
Love that. I mean, I've lived in Coral Springs a long time. I used to play basketball at Mullins Park, so I'm with you there. And my dad was a coach, and I think that impacted me.
Awesome.
Very positively.
To hear that.
What about the playground? So that's something I'm curious about. Coral Springs has a lot of playgrounds. I think it's over 50 playgrounds.
We have 49 parks in Coral Springs.
49 parks.
Which is a great number.
I'm curious, what type of priority is that for the city, for the commission, for you to build them up, maintain them, keep them nice?
I would say it's parks is probably in our top 4. I know Commissioner Vignola has been very passionate about our parks, improving our parks, and having it look a certain way. Just recently, we devoted some money to have artificial turf fields for about 7, 8, or 9 new fields, which will save a lot of money in the long run and give a lot more opportunities for our children to play. I think up and down, our Parks Department is great. There's a commitment to cleanliness, the aesthetic appeal, and we put money in our parks. So I'd say top 4 or 5, in terms of priorities.
Love that.
Yeah.
When you talk to other leadership officials around the area, do you feel like that's a priority as far as building a family, building events, parks?
That's a great question. Other priorities, definitely my colleagues in the area, they're all focused on families to one extent or another. I think to some extent we may have it a little bit easier because we have pretty good property values, so our millage rate tends to be on the lower end relative to other cities. We have a lot of volunteers, so we're able to be proactive, maybe a little bit more than some other cities that might be reactive. But I'd say overall that there's a general commitment to community, family, and parks from all of my peers around the area.
It's brilliant. I think that's how you really build a positive area, positive atmosphere. It all comes down to community, family. That's the key in my opinion. I want to segue here real briefly, just ask you a couple questions on the family law side of things, Scott. It's just become, so when I started the Act Ad project, it wasn't really something I thought about. My parents are married, they're together. I'm married, I have 2 children, I'm happily married. But then I started looking at divorce. As you know, it's hugely important. But when I started looking at numbers, divorce rates in the United States here are nearing 50%. About 40% of babies are born outside of wedlock. And so you're leading to a lot of division, right? What are some, and I realize this is a whole, you could write a book on this topic, but are there any things you could see that fathers could do better to maintain, let's bring it to you specifically. What are things that you've done specifically to maintain your relationship and keep things together?
So you mean like with my family, you mean, per se?
Well, sure, well, with your partner, because co-parenting, right, can be very challenging.
One of the things before Brenda and I got married is we had an agreement, which for the most part we've honored, and that's when we're making a decision about our children. If we differed, we're going to go the more conservative route. So we made an agreement before we got married that, if I was here, but her decision, her opinion was a little bit more conservative, we'll defer to the more conservative. And same thing if I was the more conservative one. And I'd say we have followed that to a great extent. So that's been helpful. I think another thing that's helpful is conversation. And, not letting the conversation just end unless one of you needs a break and you complete it the next day. But I remember watching an episode of The Good Wife, and the husband at the time was saying, we just have to keep the conversation going and we'll find a solution. So ultimately, that's one of the things my wife does, and we do. Now, our marriage is not perfect by any means. Our family is not perfect by any means, and we definitely have had our challenges. But at the end of the day, we talk, we're respectful, we give love, and often, not all the time, but often we give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think that goes a long way. And sometimes you have to place your own identity to the side for the sake of your identity as a couple. So sometimes that's easy when you're really focused on the commitment and not the feelings. And when you're focused on the feelings because, we each have ego,
Right.
then it becomes more difficult. So it's good to have humor, because humor kind of gets your ego a little bit lower, and my wife is very funny. So her humor has definitely helped us a great deal over time. And we love spending time with family. I think time is precious, and you have to be intentional about time with your partner and time with your children. And a lot of times I think one of the main challenges we have as humans is we kind of let others and circumstances dictate more of our time instead of us dictating our time.
I'll stay at work a little bit later. I'll go out to the pool hall, whatnot. And I think it's important to do things that you enjoy and that are part of your priority system, part of your purpose. But you're right. Making that time is good. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. We were kind of going to this, we have a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old, so everywhere we go, the kids are there. But we said, hey, we need to actually dedicate specific hours out of our week to being together, because otherwise it feels like you can almost lose it
Absolutely.
if you don't make it a point.
Yeah, recently my wife and I recommitted again. Hey, we want consistent time that we can count on each other, for each other, with each other, whether it's a date, whether it's at home, whether it's a Sunday night for a half hour talking about what our next week is going to look like. But we know that we have to recommit to having that kind of steady, consistent time, because we've been very busy lately, and we got a little bit lost in the shuffle. So the other day we sat down and we're like, all right, honey, we got to make some changes.
Sure.
So we're making those changes.
We keep the line of communication open. That's amazing. Anything you're plugging? Any websites? Anywhere you want me to send people?
With my networking organization, pnanetwork.org, we're promoting project leadership. So that would be great.
pnanetwork.org?
pnanetwork.org, yeah. I am involved in suicide prevention, and I have a campaign to eliminate the stigma that's associated with the need for mental help. Our next meeting is September 24th at 5:30 at Keller Williams. And to learn more information, people can contact me directly on my cell phone at 494-9872.
494
9872.
9872. Perfect. Yeah, suicide prevention hits home. I'm pretty involved with the Father's Rights movement and Americans for Equal Shared Parenting, and just dads trying to get time with their kids. And just last night, or just yesterday, someone took their life who's been very involved in the community. And it's kind of,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't know him personally, but it sent a lot of shock.
In the Act of Dad community.
Not in the Act Dad community. He was
Springs now.
No, he wasn't. I didn't personally know him, but people I know through Act of Dad knew of him, and he's just been fighting. He's lost. He just couldn't do it anymore. It's really sad.
Very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's a lot of depression amongst those dads that are on that side of the fence. It's really.
Well, I represent a dad that was about to give up one day. Actually, I've represented several dads that were going to give up, and I shared with them some hope some opportunities, some legal ways to not give up hope. And each of these dads wound up having time with their kids and kind of new possibility. One dad, this was awesome. This was awesome. And I have to find his picture. It reminds me. This one dad, his son was about 11, living in North Carolina with his mom, and told his dad, I've been with mom, you know, she's good, I love her. I need my dad. So will you fight for me? And he was like, it's costly, number one. Number two, you know, moms have all the rights. And I'm definitely interested, but, you know, he was hesitant. And he met with me and talked to me about a bunch of details. I said, Dad, things didn't quite work out the way you wanted to when he was 3. But if this is his preference and he's mature, you have some good chance of prevailing. And sure enough, we went to court. This was on the West Coast, and he won.
Wow, it's amazing.
And I got a picture from them like 8 years later. I got a picture early on with his son jumping up in the air, but 8 years later, how close their bond had been. And he was still close to his mom, but
it's great.
He wanted his dad.
Well, they need him. Like, you take dad out of the equation, and the deck is stacked against you. So before I let you go here, Scott, I just want to ask you, go through the quick rapid fire. A couple quick questions for you here. Favorite story to tell or read to your kids?
Favorite, Good Night Moon.
Good Night Moon.
Good Night Moon.
Brilliant. What about favorite activity? What would your favorite activity do with your kids?
To do with my kids, a meal.
A meal.
Favorite activity is a meal.
Just to sit down, eat, put the phones away.
Exactly.
Love that. What about movie? Favorite movie?
My favorite movie is The Deer Hunter. Saw it when I was about 13 or 14 years old, and impacted me greatly. It was awesome.
Excellent. Excellent. What about favorite family vacation? Where's somewhere you went that just really stands out?
I love Tuscany. We were in Italy for 17 days, and that was awesome. Breckenridge, Colorado.
Yep.
And staying at the Ritz in Naples was awesome. So those are a few that come to mind right away.
I got to visit Rome with my wife years ago. It was really cool. Seeing other countries is really
Rome is my favorite city in the world.
Fair enough. You threw the coin in the fountain, right?
Of course.
All right, so you'll be back. All right, and final question here for you, Scott. Billboard message. If you could say one thing, put it on a billboard to reach millions of people, what would it be?
There's no problem without a solution. Never lose hope.
I like that. Definitely a good saying for a mayor to have. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Scott, so much for being on Act-A-Dad, the Awesome Dad Show. It's really been good. I can tell you I've taken various nuggets of information that I think will really benefit myself.
Awesome.
And I'm sure that's going to benefit other members of the Act-A-Dad family. So
wonderful.
Thank you so much for your time.
Happy to participate.
Love it.
My pleasure. You got it.